I mean, I look back now and I'm like, wow, what if we would have allowed fear to make that decision for us? We would have never had another baby. It would have been too scared.
This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Kathryn Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. So whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Kathryn Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Well, howdy, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. If you can believe it, this is our last podcast of the season. It has been all about hope this season, and I'm especially excited because my guest today, y'all, when I took over the podcast back at the beginning of 2023 from Kelly, the founder of Hand to Hold, there was one person that reached out to me on social media, and when I read about her story, I was like, oh, you are definitely going to be my first episode, and that's who my guest is today. Her name's Kasie, and Kasie reached out to me on social media. I read about her story, and her story back in episode 55 is very different than the episode that you're going to hear today, and it is so full of hope. Actually, I'll say both episodes are full of hope. That's just sort of been the focus this particular season. But I couldn't think of anybody better to end this particular season and this particular year on. I think in a time and in a world that we are aching for hope, all of these guests have delivered, and I know that my guest today is going to do just that. So if you are sitting in a hard season of life thinking, I am never getting to the other side, or the other side I know will come, but it feels like it is a long way away, I want you to take a minute, maybe get yourself a cup of coffee, or if you're like me, a cup of tea, or a Dr. Pepper, depends on the day. But I want you to grab your favorite beverage, and I want you to sit down, and I want you to bask in the hope of this particular episode, because I know that you're going to find it. And if you have time, you can listen to all the episodes from this particular season. But I love that my guest today is just brimming with hope. My guest today is Kasie Marek. She's a medical mom trying to figure it all out one day at a time. She's a 2-time childhood cancer survivor who entered the nurse mom world after her firstborn, Noah, was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, or HLHS. Now she's trying to navigate the everyday life of medical to-do list while being a mom of 3. Yes, we're going to talk about that, being a wife, and prioritizing self-care. So with that, let's chat. I'm excited because I don't always get to re-interview someone, but you mean a lot to me because when I first took over the podcast with Hand to Hold, you were my very first guest. I got this great message from you on Instagram, and it's going to be fun to circle back and see how life is doing. So Kasie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited. I don't think I realized that I was your first guest, so that's exciting.
You were. And look at us now. We're like, I don't know, like 75 episodes later. Here we are. Isn't that crazy?
Yes.
So I know that you have an amazing story. So I'm going to send people all the way back to the past episode that you and I did. But if people are new here, sort of give them an idea. Your son has HLHS. So give people an idea of what that is and sort of how it affected your family.
Yeah. So hypoplastic left heart syndrome is HLHS. I was in my first pregnancy and 20 weeks pregnant. During the anatomy scan is when we found out my son, my firstborn Noah, had hypoplastic left heart, which essentially is the left side of his heart did not form. So it was microscopic. It was inoperable. So he only had a half of a working heart. And even that half of his heart was severely depressed as well. And so hypoplastic left heart is essentially half a heart. It's not compatible with life. And so there are a couple options, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, The only option was to go on hospice or comfort care after birth. And now they have a stage of surgeries that are an option to allow the child to live a normal life.
So remind me, how old is Noah now?
Noah just turned 5, July 30th.
That's hard to believe. So, I mean, in our last episode, we kind of talked through some of the things that you guys had been through. But when you and I last visited, this feels like a little bit of like a cliffhanger. So, when you and I last visited, Noah had been put on the transplant list, and y'all were just waiting for his hospital stay, and you hadn't been
Okay.
admitted to the hospital yet. So,
Oh, wow.
so
Okay.
I'm taking you all the way
Yeah.
back. Yes, and
So-
so let's go back to that moment for a
Mhm.
little bit, because you're getting ready to be admitted to the hospital, and then you get to the hospital. Like, what does that mean, Kasie, when someone gets put on the transplant list? Give us an idea of what does that mean? And so also, what did that look like long term for your family?
Yeah. So, it's so hard to explain hypoplastic left heart in such a short amount of time because it is such a complex diagnosis and it's not black and white. There are
Right.
so many gray areas of unknowns and the surgeries that one child may be eligible for, another child may not be. And so it's really hard to determine. And so typically HLHS is a three-stage surgery. So you have the first stage, the first week of life. And Noah's was about a 14-hour open heart surgery at 8 days old. Then you have the second surgery, which is typically between 3 to 6 months of age. And usually the patient is in the hospital between those two surgeries. So the first 6+ months, you're inpatient. Noah's second open heart surgery was at 3 months old because he had a cardiac event that landed him back into the hospital earlier than we expected and needing an emergency surgery. And then after that surgery, we got to come home for the very first time back to Austin. And we were kind of in limbo, just waiting for the third surgery, which was supposed to happen. And ultimately, Noah's heart failure was too severe to go forth with that surgery. And it was, our only option besides transplant. So when we got the news that the Fontan, which was the third surgery, was no longer an option, we started the transplant evaluation process. And it's such a lengthy process. It's a lot of meeting, it's a lot of educations with the doctors because they want you to know what life is going to look like, you
Right.
know, for the rest of their lives. And it's a commitment. And as it should be, you're getting the heart of somebody else. And we were just very, very blessed that it was an option for Noah. And so he got evaluated and we got listed July 5th of 2022. And the listing statuses for pediatrics are you can be listed as a 1A, which is your inpatient, the highest status that there is, but you have to be inpatient. And then there's 1B, which is on a heart failure medication at home. And then there's 2, which is you're at home, you're stable enough to wait. And so Noah was actually listed as a 2. So we were at home. I believe we stayed at that status for almost 6 months.
Wow.
And then Noah just got too sick to continue to wait. And, it was kind of like this determining of how much time do we actually have to wait at home
Right.
and then go inpatient and wait inpatient because the wait inpatient can also be typically 4 to 6 months of waiting
Wow.
for the call. And so, there's not this magic globe of when you're going to get the call. And so it was just so many unknowns. So ultimately in February 16th of 23, he got admitted to wait. And yeah, we had so much anticipation going into it. And so there was a lot of planning. My mom relocated here to stay with us to help with our daughter, Elodie, who was now 2 at the
Yeah, we
time.
forgot to mention that you also had a 2-year-old at home. It
Had
wasn't
a
just Noah.
2-year-old. Yes. Which adds a whole other complexity to the situation. We
Yes.
wanted to try to keep her life as normal as possible and Noah's life as normal as possible too, as you can in the hospital. But wow, it was very challenging. And we didn't know how long we were going to be in the hospital. Once he got admitted, right almost immediately, they put a PICC line in and started him on a newer medication that he had not been on for heart failure. So they had switched him called milrinone. And that's the drug that you have to be on in order to qualify as a 1A. And I'm not sure exactly what it was, the combination of all the things, but he just really went down very, very quickly. Almost immediately, I'd say 6 days in, he was no longer tolerating any foods. So he was completely on TPN and lipids, IV nutrition. And yeah, that caused so much anxiety for us because I think going into it was like, okay, we're hopeful that we have time. We have some
Right.
time. He's been stable for this many months. And then we went inpatient and things just went downhill so quickly that then we were talking to the team about, what's next and about a very risky operation to put him on essentially a Berlin heart that the outcomes were not good. And then we were talking about hospice and what that looked like to just bring him home. And all of that happened so quickly, less than a month of being in the hospital.
Kasie, that's a lot. I mean, I you were very gracious in that you have an amazing Instagram, Laughing After Lemons. Is that right? Is that your,
Right.
yeah? And you were so gracious that you were sharing. I think, I, as the mom of a kid who's been in the hospital, I know that you weren't sharing at all. Sometimes you have to filter, but I know that you were inviting people in just enough because I know you have an amazing community of people who support you, both faith-wise, but also practically. And I was grateful that you were sharing with people what it actually looks like to wait for a heart, or for any other organ, and then what that does to a family. So tell us a little bit about the day that you get the call.
Yeah. So it's, very emotional looking back at it now because that the weeks leading up to it, we were just going through so much emotionally. Brandon and I were having a really, really hard time watching Noah just struggling every day.
Of
And we
course.
knew that it's getting worse and there was nothing we could do about it, like at all. And so, and Brandon and I, we've learned throughout this journey, like we just have very different ways of handling it. And I think we've gotten kind of used to that now, like being in these traumatic situations and how we each deal with it. But we were talking about what's going to happen if this doesn't work out. Like if this is, like we're having to make these decisions, and
Sure.
it really felt like I can only speak for myself, but I really felt like I was losing hope. And we were only 42 days in when we got the call, which was just a fraction of what we were supposed to be anticipating the wait for. It was 4 to 6 months. That's the average. It could be longer. And the team, just kept saying like, it's probably going to be longer. Like just anticipate it's going to be probably the 6 month mark. And so you're anticipating that. And here we are only, a fraction of the time in. And it's like, how are we going to, if we're already watching him struggle like this, like how is this gonna how are we gonna make it that long?
Right.
And so the week leading up to it, Noah had just had a really, really tough week. And so we had scheduled a hospital meeting with the team that day. And Brandon and I also were like, we need to take some time to get rest because I think that was another part of just nobody was sleeping. We're each switching off. And so my mom had actually taken Elodie to my sister's in Houston. We had boarded our dogs for the weekend with a great friend. And we had basically booked a hotel right next to the hospital and said, we're going to have a date night and we're going to try to get some sleep. And then we had friends and family that were going to stay with Noah for the weekend.
I want to pause though, because I think it's important. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that is I think sometimes people, when they're in a really difficult spot, neglect a relationship. And in this case, it's your like your buddy that walks with you through all the hard things. I was so I gotta tell you, when I saw that, like I had mad respect for you, but it like skyrocketed because what a gift that you gave the two of you to like recognize, okay, I know that we're currently in hell, but I need to rejuvenate whatever hope we have left and like focus on that so that then we can go back and love our son even better. I think that was so powerful. I don't know if you know how powerful that was, but it was really beautiful. So, okay.
Thank
Sorry to
you.
interrupt, but I
Yeah.
felt like I needed to say that. It was so
Thank you.
good.
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard because you're in the situation where you almost feel selfish doing that, but it
Right.
is so important because you have to be your best self when you walk into those hospital doors. And that's what
Yeah.
we both had agreed on. We're like, we have to be rested. We have to be happy when we go in there because he's the one going through this. And so we
Yeah.
need to go in there 100%. And that's also why I thought it was really important when we had, we knew this day was coming that he was going to go inpatient, to have a group of friends and family that love Noah and that he has a relationship with, that
Yes.
wanted to be there. And so, like my one of my really good friends went in every Thursday for a few hours, and every week, she brought a new game that they were going to play, and just went in with fully rested and fully ready to give her energy to him when, I needed to take a break or
Yes.
Brandon needed to take a break. And so that was so important. I really think helped, Noah a lot, because we can't be all the things all the time.
No. No, we cannot.
um, so yeah, so we had booked this weekend and had really like lined up, just this time together. And we were still going to go, see Noah every day, but we really wanted to prioritize like getting rest and having time together and having a date. And so that Friday, Brandon and I were packing up our things for the weekend, and my mom had already taken Elodie. And so it was just us. And we actually had a neighbor come over, and he's our pastor now, but they had come over to pray with us right before we left. And we went to the hospital to meet with the doctors and the team. And it was a pretty heated meeting because, again, I was losing hope, and we were basically saying, like, look, if this is what the next few days looks like, we are going to have to make a decision to bring Noah home. And, we were just at that point of like, we didn't want his last days to be like that. We knew we wanted him
Right.
to be home. And so that's where we were in the journey. And it's hard to admit to that and talk to that because it sounds like I was giving up on him. And I wasn't. Yeah, it's just where we were in the journey. And what we had discussed, and we knew he every day, multiple times a day, he's like, I just want to go home. I just want to be
Mhm.
home. I just want to go home. I want to be with Elodie. I want to, and at that time, Elodie also couldn't visit.
It's too little. Yeah.
She was too little. And so she could come for like 30 minutes every Sunday.
Brutal.
Yeah, brutal. um, and so we went to the hospital, had the meeting with the doctors. It was pretty heated. And we walked out, and we were sitting in 5 o'clock traffic, heading to the hotel to drop ourselves and then go to our dinner reservations. And the doctor called, and she actually couldn't be in that meeting. I didn't know why at the time. I thought, she had something that come up. And so I thought she was just calling me to discuss how the meeting went with the rest of the team. She said, are you still here at the hospital? I was like, no. She's like, can you pull over? Or are you driving? Can you pull over? And I knew it wasn't anything bad because I could just tell in her voice. And I said, I can't. I'm on a bridge in 5 o'clock traffic. And she's like, okay, well, I'm like, just tell me. She said, we got an offer. We just got a call. And yeah, I just look, it was just so wild that also Brandon and I were together because, Brandon travels and he still remained traveling for work. And so when he was in town, we never saw each other because we were always swapping out. If I was at the
Mhm.
hospital, he was at home with Elodie, and vice versa. And so the fact that we were in the car together, that we got this call, and that everything else, Elodie was taken care of and being loved on by our family, and our dogs were on board. Like, we had everything in
Mm.
place. And then we get this call, and it was, again, here we are losing kind of hope and faith. And yeah, we got an offer, and she had kind of given me some more details. Like, it was a, riskier offer. It had been turned down by a couple centers, and that's, they took a look at everything and felt really strongly that it was a good match. And we said, okay, yeah, this is,
Yeah.
I asked the doctor one question. I said, would you put this heart in your daughter? And she said, I would. I said, okay, well, I don't have any other questions. Let me know. Let me know what's next. And
So the next thing is you're trying to find the next exit so that you can get off and turn around and get back to the hospital.
yeah. Well, there was honestly, so there wasn't much we could do right then. There was so much still that had to be done. We had a full night of testing for Noah. And so we actually didn't go to the hotel, obviously. We actually went straight to dinner, which I couldn't really eat. We still went straight to dinner because then we had to talk about how we were going to tell Noah. And I didn't want to go back to the hospital because I was so frantic. And we had to call and then rearrange what's going to happen the next few days because we knew he likely was going to be in surgery the next day. But we had none of those details yet. We had no idea where the heart was. So there was travel time, obviously, that had to be done. And so we went to dinner and started calling our friends and our family and figuring out how everything was going to happen. And we also had a room full of wonderful toys and all of the things that we had to get moved out. And so we went to dinner, then we went back to the hospital where my friend met me and we moved out all of Noah's room. And Brandon stayed with Noah while we did that, and he got all of his tests done. And they have to run every test that you can imagine, make sure he is set up for success for the transplant. And yeah, and then he went back at around 7 a.m. the next morning. And overall, I believe it was about 16 to 18 hours. He got out at 1 a.m. the next morning. And it was just a wild next few days and weeks and months. Yeah, it's been pretty wild.
How did you, Kasie, how did you reconcile the fact that you were receiving a heart from a family that you knew was grieving and y'all were rejoicing? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, I mean, once you go through the transplant evaluation and you're listed, that's the other side of it. And unfortunately, like we've had friends who have been on the other side of it. And so we've seen it firsthand. And it was so hard to pray for a heart to come. Like, you want this heart to come now, but you know what then you're asking for. And so then, of course we get the call and we know nothing about that family or that child. We know nothing. We don't know the age, boy, girl, what state, anything. And so, the very next day, Brandon and I were sitting and just like, we were like, just thinking, like, I can't even imagine what that family is going through. And we were so sad for them at the same time. Of course, being so thankful. We walked into the room after Noah had gotten back from the OR, and I mean, I just couldn't even like he just looked so different. He was so pink and full of color. And, I don't think we ever realized like how sick he looked because we were so used to seeing him every day. But it's hard for me to even look at some photos now because like, wow, I just was so blinded to how sick he was. But yeah, it was such a blessing, but also, I've thought every single day what I'm gonna say to that family and thought about them so many times throughout the day. And we talk about them very often. And it's been hard because we never knew if we were going to be able to talk to them or meet them. And so, how do you talk about someone who you don't even know? But we've definitely felt very, very blessed, and just so much gratitude, for them making that decision. I can't imagine being in that spot to have to make a decision. But I hope that one day we're able to let them know like just how thankful we are, and how much every single day like we're going to take care of this heart. And I hope it gives them peace that like they've just given us so much, just so much hope and so much life with Noah. Like he's truly a different child, honestly. I mean, he is full of energy. I just never thought that it would be possible. And he is a firecracker now.
This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app in the Apple Store or on Google Play, or you can visit our website to discover all the ways that we can support you as a NICU parent at handtohold.org. You can join one of our support groups, sign up for counseling, find loss and bereavement support, request a peer mentor, or check out our educational resources and family stories. And all of that is at no cost to you. And he had a big year this year. Like, where's he at right now?
He's at kindergarten.
That's crazy. I'm so happy for y'all.
Yeah. Like, we're just trying to let him do all of the normal kid things. We've gotten to travel. We've just gotten to do so many things with him that we were never able to do, and watch him play sports. And there's been lots of hard days, but wow,
Sure.
the good days are much more these days.
So tell people, give people an idea, like daily life with Noah, in the sense of what does it look like post-transplant? Like, how much testing is involved? How many like follow-up visits? So kind of give people like life after transplant. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. I mean, Noah's so sick before transplant. So I think it's so different for every child, what their clinical status was before and after. But the first year was really hard. I think it was a lot harder than I had anticipated. It was a lot of learning because we're truly switching one chronic illness for another.
Mm-hmm.
So there was so much to learn. You have the rejection meds and all of the, foods you cannot eat. And so it was a lot of learning. But the first 6 months, there was a lot of ups and downs for Noah. He had, I think, 5 or 6 heart caths. So we had to take him in, a full day of a heart cath to check for rejection and all the scary things. And those were some of those were unplanned because of some numbers that were not looking great. But thankfully, everything was working out. And then, he's very immunocompromised now. So a sickness can take months for him to get over. And so he actually ended up getting really sick in October, and then having a kidney injury, which then led to, kidney failure. And so it's just been a lot of things, a lot of learning, lots of appointments. And then too, he is fully G-tube fed. So it's a lot of focusing on getting him to eat and all of his things that were going on before. Yeah. So life after transplant, it's getting easier as the time goes on.
I think some people might listen to that and feel overwhelmed, but I think maybe if they go back and listen to the previous episode, but I think any family that has a medically complicated kid knows that while it may feel overwhelming at first, you sort of settle in, like you find your new normal, and other people are like, that's your normal, but
Yeah.
you do what you have to do to take care of your child, and then it just sort of becomes every day. And then sometimes I remember looking up and I'm like, how did this become our life? And I'm sure that you've asked the same question. But I mean, no. So you mentioned Noah's your first, then y'all had Elodie, and then what? Then after Elodie, then what?
Yeah. So Noah was our first, and then we brought him home for the first time at 9 to 10 months. And then probably 2 months later, I found out I was pregnant. So I had Elodie when Noah was 18 months. And that was very challenging because, Noah was just started walking at 18 months. And we were very much in the thick of it. He was still vomiting a lot. And, then I had Elodie, and then our house flooded at 6 days old for Elodie. And so then we were misplaced for 11 months. It was just all of these big things happening. It was chaos. And then last year we moved in October, got rid of all the baby stuff because we were done having babies. We were for sure done. And jokes on us, 6 weeks later, found out I was pregnant. And so I just had our third little girl. Her name's Isabella, on August 11th. It's been wild, but it's so funny because, you mentioned like normal life. I think I've gotten so used to the chaos that on the days like today, Noah's in kinder and Elodie's at school, it's very quiet and it kind of makes me uncomfortable because I feel like things are a little too calm. Like this is just too normal. Things are too calm. And I get a little more anxious because I have more time to think. um,
Right.
so I enjoy the chaos. And yeah, it does. It just becomes like your normal life. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
Well,
that's where we're
I
at.
think you're present to your life. I mean, I think that in 5 or 10 years, you might look back and be like, "How in the
How?
world did I do that?" But you get up and you do it because you love your family and you know that you're the best advocate that your kids have, whether
Yeah.
it's Noah or any of your other kids, that you're their lifeline to finding the source, the things that they need to thrive and be healthy and happy. So I don't think it's
Yeah,
abnormal. I think we just do what we have to do. That's the rule.
exactly. Yes.
So there might be some people wondering, Kasie, like, okay, so she has this baby, he's medically complicated, and then she has 2 more babies. Like,
Mhm.
did you have anxiety over that echo that they do at 20 weeks with the heart? Like, how did you get through that? Not with just 1 baby, but with 2 babies?
Yeah, Brandon and I had so many conversations after Noah and before we found out I was pregnant with Elodie about having other children, and it was a no. It was, what if this happens again? Like we were just going through so much trauma, being in the CVICU with Noah and the cardiac ICU for 9 months. We saw some very terrible things that, there were a lot
Sure.
of babies that didn't make it out there. And then just seeing what happened with Noah and, we just didn't want to at some point you feel guilty, or at least I felt very guilty. I felt like somehow it was my fault that Noah was sick. And so, as heartbreaking as it was, we were just so fearful that it was going to happen again, because we didn't have answers as to why it happened. We did all of the genetic testing. We did, we both had echoes. Like there was no rhyme or reason as to why it happened. And then I found out I was pregnant, and yeah, I freaked out. I was very anxious. It was
Mhm.
also the middle of COVID, so I felt like I didn't have as many doctor's appointments. So the first, actually, we had a fetal echo before the anatomy scan, so we had that at 17 weeks with both pregnancies after, so Elodie and Isabella, and confirming that the very big defects were out of the question. So both babies had 4 chambers, and the very
So you
big
probably
ones
breathe like this big sigh of relief, like,
breathe
"Okay."
a little bit of sigh of relief. Yeah. And then, Elodie's anatomy scan was pretty straightforward. There was nothing. Her pregnancy was very normal. Isabella's pregnancy, set me a little on edge every single anatomy scan. I had to have 3 anatomy scans with her, and they kept
Mm,
saying they couldn't see the 4 chambers, which I had also had a fetal echo. And so of course, every time I saw that, I was so nerve-wracked, but
sure.
it was just they couldn't get the right views, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
And
that must have been
then
hard.
and then, yeah, there was a few spine views they couldn't see, so then I had to have another anatomy scan, and so, of course, every single anatomy scan, I was just on edge, like, "Okay, something's gonna be wrong," like, not even with the heart, then you start thinking about all the other
Right,
things.
there's other organs besides the heart, right? Then you start
Yeah.
worrying about them all.
Yeah, and I think, after having Noah, it's just you become so aware of all of the other things.
Mhm.
I feel like when I was pregnant with Noah, I had had multiple miscarriages before, and so I was just holding my breath to make it past 12 weeks, and then once we got past 12 weeks with him, it was like, "Okay, everything's fine. It's perfectly fine." I had no idea, I just wasn't aware of all of the other things that could happen, and so, yeah, it was just such a big shock at the 20-week scan with Noah when they had said that he only had half a heart and had asked me to terminate because I just was so oblivious to everything. And so, yeah, I mean, I look back now and I'm like, wow, what if we would have allowed fear to
Mm.
make that decision for us? We would have never had another baby. It would have been too scared. So yeah, I'm really thankful that, you know, everything happened the way it did, and everything, they're both perfect and heart healthy, and Noah's perfect in his own way. And yeah, we're just really, really thankful. And I tell all the, it's so easy to now social media connects everyone.
Yes.
And so of course I'm very connected in the heart community and talk to a lot of other heart mamas. And I think we all share a big anxiety when it comes to thinking about growing our family, because there is just so much unknown. There's no answers as to why, these happen, these heart conditions. And so yeah, I'm just really, really thankful that we were able to.
I love the way you said that what if we had let fear be the predominant feeling? Like, what if we had done that? And you look around at your life and you're like, and I would have missed
Yeah.
all of this. And I don't say that casually, because I know that there are many people that make really hard decisions about their families. In fact, the guest that I just had last week, you'll hear her story. We talked about this very thing, like, how do you decide to take the leap of faith, to say, like, okay, I think we're going to have another baby. But there are many families who make a different choice and they say, that's
Yeah.
it, we're not having any
Mhm.
more. And that is also a good and valid, choice in their life. But I think this awareness of, am I making this choice because it is the best choice for our family, or am I making this choice because out of fear? And I think
Right.
there's a big distinction, I think,
Yeah.
between the two, and making a choice with confidence and then making a choice out of fear. I'm really
Yeah.
glad that you said that.
Yeah, and I mean, we knew, I mean, even now it's so hard. Like we want this huge family, and it's like, of course, deep down, we'd love to have more kids, but it's also still like very scary. It's, like, do we just be thankful that we have two healthy babies and Noah, in such a great place? It's just so hard to know, right? Because we can't see into the future. But yeah, I'm just really, really thankful with where we are now. And I think after going through so much trauma, you're like always waiting for the shoe to drop. So of
Yeah.
course I look at Noah and I'm like, oh, he's doing so great. Like, is the shoe going to drop soon? But it's just, trying to remain faithful and stay positive and think about
Yeah.
just all of the great things that have happened.
Yeah,
So
rest in the joy of today. Okay, so I
yes.
have two last questions, because if I'm looking at the clock and I was like, I could talk to you forever. Okay, so one of my questions is, how are you and Brandon, your husband, doing today?
Yeah. Great. I would say last year was probably our hardest year, even after like, I think it was just whiplash, honestly.
Sure.
We're in the hospital, we're going through all of these emotions. We were both struggling in our very own separate ways. And also it's hard because, when you're going through so much and we both handle it very differently, the last thing you want to do is, because we're both going through the same thing, the last thing you want to do is unload on your partner all of your fears and emotions. Like, that's not, in my mind, right? It's not going to do anything for him, because I know he's feeling very similar and going through his own emotions. And so
Right.
we just really struggled in a lot of ways. And again, we didn't really have time to dive into lots of therapy and all, because we were in the thick of it. That was really hard on both of us, just physically, mentally. And then Noah gets his heart, and 11 days later, we're home with Noah.
Wow.
And and then it's just life at home and trying to manage all of these new things, meds and appointments and just all of the things. And so we really struggled last year in multiple different ways of our faith, our relationship, and it's been it's it's hard to say. It's just taken a lot of time for us to, because again, I think there was just so much. I think you asked, like, why does God do this? Like, what did Noah do to deserve everything he's been through?
Hmm.
Or, what did this family, like, you ask, like, why? Why is it happening to
Hmm.
these people and these innocent children, right? We know that a child died and Noah got her heart, and so it's been a lot of diving back into our faith, getting back involved into church. And, for a while we couldn't be around a lot of people because of Noah's immunocompromised. And so we couldn't really go to church often. And so it's been just getting back into that community and yeah, but we're doing great right now. So we're doing great. The pregnancy, obviously, that was hard, but that was also just like really great for our relationship. And this birth was just very redeeming. Also, like it was kind of hectic. I ended up giving birth at a completely different hospital than expected, very small hospital. And so, but yeah, we're doing really great. We've just had to really prioritize like communication and spending time because we don't have time. Like we have 3 kids now. I have a newborn and he's going back to work, and traveling. And yeah, so just having to prioritize that time and balance and conquer and divide and yeah, leaning on each other and
Yeah, no, I think it's good for people to hear that relationships, whether it's your partner or your spouse, that they go through different peaks and valleys, and that when you have a child or children that require a lot of you, I think what you said of being intentional, and I mean, I think that you share
Mhm.
that on social media, but about being intentional with the time that you do spend together and knowing that like when you get pockets of quiet or when you get an opportunity to have dinner, even if it's the same day that you get a call that your son has a heart, like that y'all prioritize that and said like, we need this time before we go back into battle or before we go back in and do the hard things. So I think
Yeah.
this reminder that we have to keep checking in with the people that support and love us so that then we can support and love our
Yeah.
children and the other people in our lives. I think that's a important message to share. So
Yeah.
Kasie, if someone is listening to this and maybe their child is getting ready to undergo a transplant or they're on the transplant list and waiting, what encouragement, what hope would you give them?
Oh gosh. To truly take it day by day, I think I always say that in this entire journey, like to not try to think about too far into the future. I look back and I'm like, oh, I wish I just would have been more hopeful because who would have thought we would have gotten the call for Noah's Heart at 42 days and, and I think at that point we were just like, okay, there's just no way, right? Like the team is saying this, but there is a way. And it's hard when you have the doctors telling you, this is the statistic, this is the average time. And then you're looking at everyone else's journey too and seeing like, okay, they waited a year, they waited 9 months, but really just trying to take it day by day and knowing that every child's journey, every family's journey is its own and just trying to remain hopeful and just take it by day, minute by minute, just finding joy in the little things. Like I even look back at our days in the hospital, and it was so nice to just be able to sit and like play
Yeah.
games. And I'm like so thankful for that time too, even though it was very, very hard in the moment. There was also some very beautiful moments in that time of just being present and sitting and spending time together and just being very, very intentional about that time that we were there with him. And yeah, and it brought so many of our friends and family together as well. Noah's journey definitely is brings so many people together that love him and that we love. And yeah, we're just so grateful for that. And so I think finding the joy and the beauty and all of that and taking it day by day, minute by minute, sometimes second by second.
I'm so grateful for your generosity and sharing your story here, but certainly in the ways in which you share it on social media, both with the people that know you in real life, but also the people that are feeling like, hey, she's in my shoes. She knows what we're going through. She knows how it feels. So I'm really hopeful that if someone is listening to this today and maybe has a similar story to yours, that they're like, okay, I can maybe get a glimpse of what it might be like on the other side. So thanks for giving everybody a lot of hope. I'm sure that we all needed it. So thank you. And in this year of 2024, my last 2-minute take of not only the season, but of the year this year, don't let fear drive your choices. When I ask the questions like, what hope or what advice do you have for people, or give us a glimpse into what your life looks like today? I always just like sit back and think, I wonder what they're going to share. I wonder what knowledge they're going to drop that people are going to resonate with. And I'm fairly certain that when Kasie said that, don't let fear drive your choices, that may have resonated with you. It certainly resonated with me. I think that when we find ourselves in a really hard place, we always wonder, like, one, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get through to the other side? But also, what kind of person am I going to be on the other side? How am I going to be changed for better or for worse for what I'm currently going through? And I was really struck by this idea of how do we make our choices? And while every family comes to a different decision, so we'll use this as an example. Like if you are staring down a heart transplant or any other kind of organ transplant for your child, and you're asking yourself the question, should we have more babies? Or should I go this particular medical route or not? I think that Kasie's advice of letting intentionality and purpose drive your choice as opposed to fear really can benefit all of us. Even though our choice at the end of the day may be different than someone else's, that different choice doesn't mean that you acted out of fear or not out of fear. I think it's the intention of the heart, which seems appropriate for today. The intention of the heart and what is it that you desire? And I think that we all desire hope. So let hope help you make that decision. Don't let fear rob you of making a beautiful decision for your family, whatever it may be. Set the fear aside and inject yourself with some hope. And I'm so hopeful that this particular season infused you with just that. There were so many great stories from so many people that I love and that I respect and that I adore. And I got to have them in this season. It feels almost extravagant to have such amazing guests in this particular season, but I felt like we needed to end 2024 on a real high note of hope. And so, yes, I think we did it. We have so much coming in 2025, but I want to say this is that take the next couple of months to just take a deep breath, recenter. Go back and listen. There are so many episodes. Like I said, my very first episode was 54 when I introduced the podcast, and then episode 55 with Kasie was the first one that I did. And we've had a slew of podcasts since then. So go back and listen. 2024 has been full of so many fantastic guests, as was 23. And even before that, Kelly did an amazing job with the podcast. So take a deep breath. I will see y'all back in 2025. If you get a chance, give us a rating on your favorite Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Give us a rating over there. Go watch us on YouTube and tell a friend. I think that is my greatest joy, is when I get a note and someone's like, "Hey, I really love this episode," and I send it to someone. And I'm like, yes, that's what we hope, is that something that a guest says, some conversation that we have really resonates with you and makes you feel less alone in a place that can feel incredibly lonely. So y'all, go have a great rest of 2024. Take a deep breath, and I'll see you back in 2025.